You never know.
Yeah.
All right, Leo, we are live. Have a great time.
There's something about live streams too.
Yeah, they're special.
They're very special. Adds a little extra pressure
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
No pressure here on the 60 minutes, Bill.
None at all.
Yeah.
We'll put the clock up.
Well, we're streaming now, and
Good.
we're outed, so everybody knows that we're very nervous. No, I'm just kidding. Bill Geyer, thank you for coming back. This is 2 years ago that you came on, and we talked about previous year planning, development, rental, the roofs over heads,
Right.
the projections for the upcoming years, and there was a lot of interesting stuff that happened that year and ensued from there. But just to introduce you or reintroduce you for those that have not that are not familiar with Bill, I would be surprised if most people in this group are not familiar with Bill or have not seen his name somewhere. But Bill was the previous planning director for the city of Bellingham, did a similar role in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And
long time ago. Yep.
Long time ago. Yeah. Just 20 years ago, right?
30, going on 35 now. So, yeah.
So you've been doing this about 45 years
40,
now?
Yeah, 46, 47 years, right?
Yeah,
Total.
just a couple.
Yeah.
And then now you're on the private sector.
Since 91, but in the private sector, yeah.
So private sector you've done over $500 million.
Yeah, we're over $500 million now in projects approved and built.
So you're effective and you get things done is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I like to, I tell my clients I'd rather see it get built than have to litigate.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have done expert witnessing, both federal court and superior court, but I really like the process of getting projects built, and built a couple subdivisions myself off Barclay Boulevard. And so I just work with clients, commercial, industrial, multifamily, residential.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about last time that I think is really unique about your skill set and your previous role is that you know how to communicate between the two worlds. It seems butting of heads between the city this, the city that, and the developers just want everything done immediately. And you have this interesting mix of both worlds where you can communicate between the two. And that's why you're so successful at what you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's actually grown into 3, if not 4 worlds, where the third world is, particularly in Bellingham, it's the general public that is engaged in projects in the review, not only from a client perspective of purchasing, either renting or homeowner, but also just being active in what's occurring in various policy development. There's almost like a fourth world that's developed of late, and that's advocacy groups, excuse me. And these are groups that they function for the purpose of advocating their position, whether it's from the designer's perspective, engineers, architects, or the builder's perspective, or even from, as we see here in the state of Washington extensively, folks that are heavily involved into environmental protection. And that just the first 4 groups together causes a natural conflict. And sometimes it works out, pretty well, but there's a lot of different facets to it.
It's funny because they all have similar goals of getting something done.
Yes.
But they all just have a different way of looking at how to get it done and a different set of checkpoints to do that.
Right.
Anyways, so when we talked before, this was 2 years ago, right in the middle of COVID. We were experiencing incredibly low interest rates and low inventory. That has the inventory hasn't changed a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates have changed a lot.
Yes, they have, boy. Yeah.
And then one of the things that we'll kind of get into more is that connection between roofs over heads, the rental pool, and the purchaser and selling pool.
Okay.
But before we do that, what have you seen that we talked about that was your crystal ball a couple years ago? What have you seen happen that's pretty significant? And this is a group of real estate agents, and we're trying to help everybody, including myself, communicate better with sellers as these policies change, these urban growth boundaries sprawl further or don't. This is how we're trying to communicate and who we're trying to communicate with.
Sure.
What are you seeing? Like, what have you seen since we last talked? What has come to be?
Okay. Well, there's a couple trends in the aggregate, and that is on the national level, that are continuing and consolidating more. And one of the major ones is you're seeing consolidation of population in the U.S. into 11 what's called mega regions. Okay, and for example, you can get out your maps at home while you're listening to us. Cascadia, of course, is where we are. That's from Portland to Seattle, Vancouver, Northern California, Southern California, Arizona Sun area, the Texas Triangle, which is Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and a little bit over to Houston. You got the Gulf Coast, which is Brownsville, swinging around the Gulf, including Houston, all the way to New Orleans. The Rockies front, which is Denver and South Albuquerque, all of Florida. Okay. The Piedmont Atlantic, which is Atlanta, then going over to North Carolina. And then you have the Great Lakes, and finally the the one that's been around for the longest, BOWASH, Boston and Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
Now, those are where the population are pretty much consolidating. You have other areas like Nashville and others which are standalones that are growing. But how it relates is the Cascadia. Typically in these mega regions, you have primary and secondary cities. Now, of course, in Cascadia, you've got Portland and Seattle, BC. All right, they're the primaries. You have secondary areas or areas cities you can classify as secondary, such as Olympia, Eugene, and Salem. What's happening here, our role in this mega region is Bellingham is right now from what's been classified as a tertiary, smaller city and not as much economic activity. And over the past 20 years, it's now very rapidly and very soon can be classified as a. Why? Well, you look at what's happening in our economy. You look at we have an international airport that's continuing in its service, not only U.S. but Canadian population. The number of airlines there, Western continues to grow. Peace Health is definitely a regional center up here. You're seeing other companies that are manufacturing things here, Alpha Tech and others, that are shipping it out. And you have a lot of smaller companies. So the job growth is there, and we're much more diverse than we were, say, 30 years ago. So moving into this secondary category has a pretty positive impact as to what our long-term economic role can be. But when we do a drill down, I'm certain most of the professionals listening here today, they understand Growth Management Act has been in here since 1991. And for the county and the 7 cities that are in Whatcom, we have an obligation to have a comprehensive plan. And that comprehensive plan is to manage the growth of urban and rural areas, to protect agricultural areas and forestry areas, and to specifically match the land uses within the cities and their surrounding, what's called urban growth boundaries, to match those land uses to the utility function. Okay, you can't just say, yeah, we're going to make this industrial and you don't have any provision for any water supply, fire support, roads, etc. They have to match. So you have to match those two components, and typically the critical utilities then are going to be your sewer, your water, and your stormwater. Other components of the comp plan protect environmental resources, shorelines, creeks, wetlands, and mineral resources. We have a lot of gravel resources in this county. But those plans have to be integrated among the cities in the county. So what's occurring now is there's a 20-year planning horizon. The last one was 2016. So 2016 through 2036. The next update for Whatcom County and all the cities, 7 cities, is due July 2025. Okay.
That's coming up soon.
That's soon. So you don't start work in May of 2025.
Right.
They started work last year, in some cases a year and a half ago, because there is a baseline report that's publicly available called the Buildable Lands Report. Either Whatcom County, go on their website, or the city of Bellingham. And its purpose is to show the population and job growth. The state says, you're doing this 20 horizon. You need, for the update, show us what did you do? What actually happened? What are you seeing that can now happen in the remainder? So I'm going to give you a 15-year breakdown. Okay. So the analysis has been done and it's published. And there's a lot of variables in here that can play into this, but it's all going to boil down to what sort of housing mix we may see in the next 15 to 20 years plus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So bear with me a little bit. The projected population in 2016 was that we would have in that 20-year period 275,450, 275 and some change, and jobs of 120,000 roughly.
So that's between 2016 and 2036.
Correct.
Okay.
For the 20-year horizon. Okay. So that's an add of 60,500 people over 20 years. Okay. It's an add of 32,000 jobs roughly. And these projections they're pretty sound. There's some basis to it that it has been reviewed by a peer group. A lot of people have argued different variables, but we're going to use those for discussion today. Okay. And this is the first important point. In the first 5 years, the population has been estimated that has been accommodated, this first 5 years, is about 14,400. So 25% of what was projected. Okay. Well, 5 years, 25%, 20 horizon. You can say, well, you're kind of on schedule.
Right.
Roughly. Okay. Jobs, a little bit lower, 5,400 jobs, only 17%. So that's lacking. All right.
And what would be, obviously the population growth that just takes someone moving here,
Correct.
and then employment is a whole nother
Whole
ball of
nother
wax.
thing.
But what do you think contributes to, in Whatcom County, contributes to that being behind schedule?
More retired people moving in.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And there may be an anomaly in how the jobs are reported, because like many of us that are, independent workers, you may not fit into that employment statistic that comes out from state LNI or state employment industries. But again, in the aggregate. Okay.
Right.
So what do we have left for 15 years? That's the question that is going to be dealt with over the next year and a half by the county council and city councils. And so to meet this projection, which comes from the state, okay, and it's adopted by elected officials, there's still a need of 46,000 population that's going to arrive, okay, in the next 15 years, and about 26,600 jobs. Well, this is where the big decision becomes. The county and city, they start looking at what is the acreage that's currently available to meet this population and job growth? And is that acreage sufficient for the growth that we have projected? And when you think that through, there's a bunch of variables. Is the density 4 units per acre or 11 per acre, right? Is it brick and mortar businesses, or is it higher tech with less space that you need for individuals? Okay, so there's a lot of variables here, but we're going to stay at the aggregate. All right. So with 73,000 more people to come in, another 41,000 jobs, the question is, do we have enough land to meet that requirement? This report by the county says, yes, we do. In fact, they're saying we have a surplus of land that's either in cities and UGAs and some smaller rural areas that can actually service up to an additional 34,000 people, okay, above and beyond the 73,000.
Mm-hmm.
And same relationship on jobs. They're saying that of the 41,000 that will occur in this 15-year period, we have enough land for a surplus of an additional 16,800. Okay. Now that surplus, this is the first big takeaway. That surplus, for those of us, the design professionals in the field, we pretty much contest that, because when I come in with a client and you have, say, a 10-acre parcel that you want to develop residentially, and you have an idea what the theoretical zoning yield is, and maybe it's 100 units, just to throw a number out. But by the time you get into designing it, and you consume land for your stormwater, your roads and access points, your open space, and if you happen to have any natural resources for buffers, well, your footprint for the building gets smaller if you have no relief on height. Well, what happens? You've lost unit yield, right?
Mm-hmm.
So although your theoretical yield maybe is 100 units, maybe you're coming in at 80, maybe 60. It's all site dependent. So that's the point of contention, where this report, and it's relatively statistically valid, is it true that there's that much surplus? And many people will say no, because if you don't change from this conclusion, the logical statement would be then urban growth boundaries in this next go around in 2025 will not change. There'll be no acreage added to any of the 7 cities or their incorporated areas. And as we all know, if you're not in a city or in a utility zone like out in Birch Bay, if you don't have those utilities, you don't build to urban densities.
Right.
It's rural, which works against meeting these figures. So that's the first point. Second point, when you look at what has actually been built over these past 5 years, we've averaged about, this is countywide, 1,346 dwelling units per year. Well, to catch up to the projected growth rate to hit this in 2036 of the people that are coming, technically we should be building 1,474 dwelling units per year. Our listeners and people watching know the demand is continuing. People are coming here. And if the supply is not being built to respond to the demand, economics 101 kicks in, price points go up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the second big takeaway. And the third big takeaway to it is that if the lands that are supposed to be available for both residential as well as the commercial industrial activities, if it's not available so it can get the utilities to it and it can move through an approval process, then you really don't have the basis for the investor or a business owner or a family to make an investment decision to build on that property.
Right.
Right. They can't get there. It's a nice dream, but you can't get there. Now, those that are thick-skinned, they can see over the horizon, and they're well heeled in this, and they have the patience of, 2-3 years or 4 or 5, you'll get through it. But that's kind of the aggregate at this point. There's some other pieces we'll get into this, but we'll kind of stop there and see what.
Well, it's interesting because there's such a focus, especially from our group, and I'm sure everybody in this group gets Instagram spammed and YouTube clickbait on. We kind of talked about this earlier, where people are throwing. It's all been so hyper focused on interest rates, and I'm not out here trying to say that interest rates aren't a huge factor in affordability, but the thing that I feel like we constantly are putting in a very, very distant second position is inventory and lack thereof, or how expensive it is to pull a permit to build a house, or how difficult it is how long the exit point for a developer to bring more units to the market. And you said 1,074. Would you? I mean, can you see that happening at our current pace?
No, I can't. And you raise a very important point. I mean, my perspective is, again, looking at this 5, 10, 20-year horizon. And yes, interest rates impact. And in the couple subdivisions that I've built and other projects I've built, yes, interest rates definitely impact. If you are looking to take land to its ultimate use so that you can either for your own or you're selling it to your customer, you can't rely solely on interest rates this quarter.
Right.
Okay. And here's why. We talked earlier about this land availability. Well, to move a project through a review, every entity, every agency has a pre-application stage, and that can run anywhere from a month to 6 months. There's no hard and fast line to that. Okay. But there is a hard line once you make your formal application. Now, this is after you've done your design work. Okay. That you are to, by state law, or to have your approval within have the decision, because sometimes it's the other way. You're to have your decision within 120 days. Okay. So right there, you're looking at, that 120 plus your design work. You got 6, 8, 9 months just in the paperwork process.
Right.
All right. And that's going to go beyond interest rate, ups and downs. You then go and look at how it fits into the construction schedule of which season you want to hit in, and you're assessing your risk. You're 2 years to 3 years in looking at that whole completion point, if not a little bit longer. And if you're looking for exit point, you really are looking out farther. So when I go back, hate to use that term, when I go back to,
it's a nice corporate buzzword.
Yeah, that's why I don't like it.
Now I'm going to try to interject as many corporate buzzwords culture.
We'll keep a scorecard.
Yeah, we'll table that.
I'm down one.
Yeah, table that later.
But when you look back at land availability and those issues of, are the utilities actually proximity that you can get them to your site, you can extend them in an economical fashion, that really works on your risk assessment, right? And so if it takes that time to make that decision, now you can get into your design of your project, but you have to load that time frame in. So the usual developer will be looking on these on 5 and 8 year horizons.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a short version on that.
Well, and it's interesting too, because something that you and I have talked about as well is that, you see, especially with all of these 5-year commercial loans coming due, and the adjustable rates associated with those, where people are starting to go, oh my God, I can't afford this. Yeah. Or they can afford it, but it's just completely in their cash flow or whatever the reason being, and they're selling them, but they're not leaving any sort of margin on the table for the potential buyer. Yeah. So we're in an interesting position where the current inventory, and they're not fully permitted. If they're let's talk about a development site, they're not fully permitted. They're 6 months away. They have to renew the permit or whatever it is, but they want premium dollar for these things. And so it seems like an interesting time where people are kind of offloading these projects. They're like, it's going to be another year. My loan, whatever reason, fill in the blank, I'm too far away.
Yeah.
I don't have my subs there. What are you seeing as far as that market goes? I see it from the sales side, but from the other side with what you're dealing with, what are you seeing there?
Well, it's real interesting because in some portions of the market, there is a pullback where projects have been placed on hold. I've seen a couple industrial projects that were really going to fly back in, say, August of last year. And then they just, the got nervous, more nervous, more nervous, and then beginning of the year said, yeah, I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
I've seen some pullbacks on some proposed multifamily, but there's it's not a complete pullback because we're still seeing, at least in Bellingham, 1.5–2% vacancy rate. If you've got when I'm observing, if the net worth is there and the strength of the developer, they'll probably go through. But I am seeing some timing choices being made to delay it a little bit. For example, when you get your permit to do a multifamily development, and this is common in both the smaller cities as well as Bellingham, you go through some level of design review and approval. Well, those permits typically have a 2-year shelf life, and it's based on the system says, okay, if you're going to come in for a design review, you really know what you're going to do. So we just need we need to approve your design according to the adopted ordinance. Here's your permit. Off you can go, and now you can get your construction plans. Well, that's extremely hard to do. If you get a site plan approved, and now you're going to go into construction drawings, well, depending on your architect, your structural, your civil, et cetera, that may be another 3 to 9 months, and so you're chewing up a lot of your time. Those design decisions, in my opinion, really should be like a 5-year shelf life. When you do a short plot, you plat land, create new lots, you have a 5-year life to it. Well, all those permits should have that 5-year life to help get to a risk assessment so that the interest spike in 1 year doesn't totally kill your project. And I think, to answer your question, I think that's going to be a challenge this spring and probably in the third quarter this year. Some people are going to be weighing that out. I mean, just 3-4 weeks ago, because of the March 15th deadline of the new code that came in, the new energy code. And I'm being told it's like adding $20,000 cost to a house to implement versus what it was last year. Well, I know a couple builders that their permits were coming up against the point of expiring, and they renewed them for a year because they did not want to have to incur that cost. But they're also hedging their bet that the market will turn favorably for them next year, that they're willing to go out and get a loan. So I think we will see some projects delayed this year. Folks that are very well heeled, they'll go forward. And then you'll probably go back out and refi next year, depending on what happens in the interest rates. But things may slow down a little bit. On the very front end, we're seeing some people pulling back.
Yeah. Let's talk about roofs over heads.
Okay.
We talked about this last time, and it's a lot of things stuck from our last conversation, but that one has stuck. The very connected relationship between rental, the rental market and the sale market. And obviously some people are in this transitionary period where they're renting, saving up, or they're changing jobs or whatever it is so they can launch and buy a house. Other people are in a position where they have to stay in the rental market. But there's this ebb and flow to it. When one's thriving, the other one's not thriving, or at times it can be somewhat balanced. But what are you seeing right now versus last time we talked with that relationship between, there's less homes that are selling.
Yeah.
Right.
There are.
And rents aren't going down. So we're in this interesting place.
Rents are not going down. And what I'm seeing, the cost to produce new housing in any form continues to go up, from the material to the labor to the land, and then all the other agency components, as far as the reviews and utilities, et cetera. So your price points are still rising. I don't get the sense that incomes, family incomes, are rising commensurate with that cost increase. We have always lagged behind in wage and earners capacity below Skagit County and Snohomish. Okay. We've been historically about 10% behind Skagit, and we're about 20%, sometimes more. 10% behind Skagit, 20% or more behind Snohomish. And there's a lot more tech wages as you go further south. But that wage limitation, of course, is going to equate to who can buy at what ranges. Well, if we're seeing a lot of homes, the starter homes coming out at, 650, 7, whatever they are, it's
ouch. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. I mean, really, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my kids and my grandkids, it's like, I don't know what you're going to do. And so families, naturally, you have a higher demand then in the rental area. And we're seeing rents that, you're seeing 2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms in Bellingham that are running, in the low end, $2,300, $2,400 a month. And you're seeing some at $2,800, so it's, you look at that and you compare it to the income, you're going, that doesn't hit what the affordability is supposed to be. We're out of sequence for some reason, and that has been an historical problem in this area for about 30 years. I did one of the first affordable housing analysis back in '89. Was part of one that happened in the late '90s, but that disparity is there. I think that the problems that we've identified earlier of getting land into production to meet the market, like I said, got to have 1,474 units a year. We're not producing that well. That's just driving these prices higher. There are things that the municipalities can do. And I would hope that the recent elections, you got new people that maybe they'll take this upon themselves. But for example, Bellingham has many areas that they still have a half-acre lot minimum on the zoning. Who's creating half-acre lots with detached houses?
No, they're like 40. What is it? 4792, 4972. Those lots in Columbia, and obviously, people are looking for infill, right?
Right.
Yeah, we don't see those anymore.
You don't see them, but
Yeah.
but the city could, and hopefully they should. Quite frankly, I will advocate for this in their comp plan change, and the county should advise them for the city to do the same, because the county has that function. They can do that. Is to take that 20,000 square foot half acre lot and decrease it to 10 or 8,000. In other words, double or triple the potential density that can go on those lots. They can do that in a heartbeat. Okay. The other thing to do, and all the cities could do this, annex all of the urban growth areas. You have areas outside of all the 7 cities that are for future growth. Well, why not annex them? Because now you have them inside a city. So the proper planning and management to get into those areas to develop is through one agency instead of working out to the county. Plus you have access to utilities.
Right.
And if you want your utilities.
And a lot.
And right. And if you need the utilities, guess what? You pay to play. I am not a believer of free utilities at all. I mean, the homes that I built, you paid for the water and sewer and the stormwater. And okay, and I factored in, I take the risk of selling that house. Same thing here. But if the municipalities annex their growth boundaries, now you can manage it to do that. So that's the second thing. The third thing they can do is, okay, really look at some of these locations that growth should be targeted towards them. And Bellingham did this before on Bakerview. Bakerview used to be between the guide meridian and heading west over to the airport. It used to be a 2-lane road. Well, in 1989, they figured out there's going to be some growth in this area. We, the city, need to help this happen. So we're going to put together a water and sewer local improvement district in this area. And we will assess the property owners for the improvements going in the ground. They eventually passed that, put the assessment on it, and now you have Baker out the way it is, for good, bad, or ugly. But they responded to what the market demands were. And a similar thing can happen now in that same venue if the municipalities are really serious about, everybody says housing affordability it's a threat to our,
buzzword.
Yeah, there you go. Number 2. It's a threat to our lifestyle. And we're not meeting our 1,474 units a year. Okay, take some steps.
Yeah.
Change your zoning in those areas. Put in locations that you will be the front end of an LID, that you get the improvements to it. The private sector will respond. It will respond.
Well, but Bill, here the thing that I hear all the time is that people say, well, this builder is making so much money when they build this house and sell it. And I'm not saying that, that the builder's not making money, but it's an interesting mix of like, how do we create this affordable housing? This is like at the core what everybody is saying is a threat. And it is, like, I will 100% say that it is a problem.
Yeah.
Even looking at just making a move right now or buying my own house right now, I just was like, I would rather move away.
Yeah.
And that's just being realistic about it. But I hear it a lot where people say, well, the builders, we need to increase the cost because the builder's making all this money. But what's your take on that role, or the developer or the person that is stepping in from the private sector, working with the city, and through, someone who knows a lot about how to communicate with both sides? But why would the builder get punished or the developer get punished if they're trying to create more housing? What's that balance like between how do we create more affordable housing when the cost keeps rising for even that person.
Right. I mean, ultimately, in the best world, the market is going to have its hand on who is benefiting, who's having to assume the risk and pay. What we're seeing is some of the things we've talked about. When you're looking 5 to 8 years out as a developer for your exit point, that's a huge risk, and you've got to put everything in the ground at the front end. All right. And then you've got to wait until buildings have been built, and then you have the ability that something is really going to meet the market, and you've made the choice. Yeah, I actually guessed right.
Yeah, it's a guess.
Right. I chose the proper housing form to meet the market, 4 years ago. All right.
Yeah.
Because that's, if we're talking about subdivisions and creation of a multiple number of homes, that's your horizon. Okay. It's not 1 year. You're looking 4 or 5 years. So if you're dropping millions into the ground now on banking that you're going to be able to exit 4 or 5 years later, you really better know what you're doing, and you better have your costs identified. Now, in that review process, your cost can change because of maybe there's additional water line that's got to go in, or you have now a new ordinance that has come in. Bellingham's looking at this tree preservation ordinance, which, if they pursue this, it's going to reduce further the amount of land that's available. It's just working in the wrong direction. There's other things that some cities have done where they're not being aggressive enough in how they plan their utilities, let alone the urban growth boundaries and what they can do. Birch Bay has a significant problem where you have a water and sewer district. You have huge impact fees you're paying at the front end, and that's just to get your paperwork approved. So, the risk is there. So the entities that are providing homes in whatever form, be it attached homes, townhouses, duplexes, whatever, you have this capital cost at the front end, and you've got to know that you can come out the other way. Now, let's look at the rental market. Same thing. They may be on, say, a 2-year cycle, maybe 2.5, because you'll move through your approvals and then 1.5 years or so to construct. Right? You're still looking at the 2.5 year when the return's coming out. Well, you and everyone that's watching today, it's not that first year of rent that you recover.
Right.
Right? That's why you have a pro forma. You're amortizing costs out, and you're looking at that at your exit point, whether it's 10, 20, 25 years out. But if the cost at the front end that you've assumed is going to be X, and by the time you go through the entitlement approval and it's X plus 30%, and now the bank calls you up the next week and said, that loan we thought we are going to do at, 75, 80% loan to value, we're going to ratchet down to 60%.
Ouch.
You're going home.
Yeah.
Right. And that is what's happening. So you have to be able to move through that. So the response, I think, from a public policy perspective is those things that can be stabilized, land use decisions and utility planning and ability to enter the system, they need to be equalized and stabilized to reduce risk. And there's nothing lost by the municipality in doing that. If anything, it's surety, which is what the general public wants. They don't want something to just pop up and there it is.
Right.
But if you have a stabilized process, then the other investment decisions you're asking about are left with the developer. They're in his hand. And I fully support that. That's where the risk has got to be. Do they get profitable? Are they profitable from that? Sure.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Just like all the sub trades that they're hiring to work for them. You can have as many as 25 sub trades in building one house.
Yeah. So there's something new that happened in Washington State last year. And I think the main focus of this question is we communicate with buyers and sellers every day. Hopefully everybody here is getting calls every single day, because that would make me happy for everybody.
Right.
But the whole point is that we get these calls, people hear, maybe it's a clickbait YouTube video. I'm going to keep hammering on YouTube and Instagram and all the stuff. Or maybe it's, it's just that person just hears about it through a public meeting or through a friend or a neighbor, that all of a sudden you have these single family dwellings and the density is increased and you can have up to 4 units. And all of a sudden my little tear down house in Columbia is worth, well, $250 a unit.
Right.
There's all these assumptive, it happens so often, and we deal with this, and we have to not put out the fire, but kind of calm the fire down a little bit and say, okay, yeah, there's some truth to this, but this is where it's kind of gotten blown out of proportion. Let's just cut through all that extra crap. And what does this actually mean, and what can people actually do? Yeah,
there's definitely a bit of golden goose about to lay the egg mentality. And I'm here to tell you that the goose is not going to lay until 2026. The Comp plans will come in July 2025. They're not going to go earlier. That's where it is. And the state law that was passed is House Bill 1110, says that development regulations shall be adopted by the county and city within 6 months after the comp plan is done. So now we're January 2026. Okay. And the one that you're referring to says that any single family lot, existing single family lot, has the ability to build up to 4 units, not directly 4, but just up to. So it could be a duplex, triplex, fourplex.
Great. I'm gonna build a triplex in my backyard.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right. That's what I can do.
Well,
right.
I gave it's the old. Remember last time we talked, I gave you the yeah, but.
Yeah,
Right?
but.
Yeah, but. Okay. The other piece to it is just, it's just to mention this. If a person wanted to go from 4 up to 6 units, which it could happen in Bellingham, that those extra 2 have to be an affordable unit. So there's lower rent that you're coveting to. So let's deal with just the 4, because a lot of people are probably looking at that as, oh boy, I got something happening here. Well, first off, that ability to get the number of units on the lot depends upon the physical presence of the lot itself right now. Where is the footprint of the building? Is there sufficient water, fire flow coming to the lot so you can indeed put more units in? Is your sewer line big enough? Is the main that serves it, is there capacity in the trunk to actually downstream? Is the road in condition that it's not just a little beat up 18-footer? You've got a pretty good standard road, and 20 foot's the standard in Bellingham. And these same sort of issues will come up in the other cities as well. Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the physical ability to put extra units and meet then the next requirements for parking, maneuvering your vehicles around it, and otherwise? That will determine whether or not you can do it. So if you are on your smaller lot in Columbia, if that lot happens to be only, say, 3,500 to 4,000 square feet, you're going to have to do some really good design work to get it in. If you've got some of these half-acre lots I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
the 20,000, yeah, you could do 4 units on those all day long. So what did I just say? I just told 14 areas around Bellingham that between now and July 2025, this reality is going to come home to roost. Okay. Whatcom Falls neighborhood, Edgemore,
Mm-hmm.
South, Samish, Puget, where there's still some larger lots. And the issue is going to be this, just like you said, the neighbor looking over at his neighbor's piece, and the neighbor says, hey, I'm putting a 4-plex in here. Have a nice day. And you're going, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, the state law provides, it allows it. So the staff is going to have to move through this analysis, the council, and this is going to happen in other cities as well. They're going to have to come to grips with how much density are we going to result from this? You go back to my opening statements here today, the 1474 units. Well, if you have this increase that potentially could occur beginning in 2026, how do you factor that in to the land capacity analysis? The land capacity analysis was a fixed snapshot in 2022. Now we have this new thing that technically you could take 3 or 4 blocks and you can go 4 times the density on that block, right? By state law.
Right.
And you as the neighbor, you can't stop me as long as I can meet those development requirements. That's a huge, how do I say this? That's a huge tomato being tossed in Bellingham, okay? Because Bellingham has always had these discussions and outright arguments about how much density we really want. That's why you still have these half-acre lots out there. So that's a big challenge. And after 2026 is when the land use system would stabilize and you could begin to figure out, can I really do it or not? So bringing it today, I mean, you tell me that the real estate professionals I talk to, you really don't value on what's over the horizon. The appraiser comes in. Does he appraise what it's going to be in 5 years? No. What do you have today? Right? What are the facts on the ground? And that's what I would say these people that are clickbaiting today saying, I can do a 4-plex. Well, no, you can't. It can't happen until 2026 and you have these issues. You better go hire a design professional to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the biggest challenges is that and it's not necessarily, sometimes, it's the real estate professional. Maybe they're not doing enough guidance with their client on, hey, here's the hit list that in order to do this, if I set the parameters and I say, here's the current value of this property or my perception of the current value, and here's what actually is here today. Yes, you could do this potentially tomorrow, but the person that does that tomorrow should be entitled to whatever result or reward comes from that.
Right.
If we're talking about today, here's what you can do. And the problem is, and I think what I'm trying to get to with this group is like, how do we do a better job communicating with those people and setting the boundaries? And maybe it's, well, we don't want to walk away from business, but we also want to be realistic, because if we just take a listing and it doesn't sell because we're not realistic on price, potential use, any of the above, we're actually shooting them in the foot at the same time as shooting ourselves in the foot. And so what are some types of conversations that you would be having in your profession with that seller? If I were to say, hey, come talk to, Bob and Sue, and they think this is what they want to do. This is kind of the land use consultant hat on.
Right.
What are some of the questions that you ask them, or parameters that you set out there for them to say, yeah, this is doable and at this time, but here are the steps.
Right. I would definitely confirm what you have today. And when I each year I would do a guest lecture up at Western. I'd tell the students up there, I said, you got to do your research, you got to document it, and have it in a format that you can easily communicate. So the very first thing is, okay, and the agents, real estate professionals can do this. What is the actual zoning today? It's all online. Go get it. If you don't understand it, read it and understand it. If you can't understand it, find somebody that can tell you and help you understand. Get that. Understand what's happening on the utilities to the site. What exists today? Is there a water meter? What size? Do you have a sewer connection? Is there stormwater? Are there deficiencies in the roads? Whatever. Is it close to an environmental protected area? Wetlands, creeks, shorelines. And those are pretty obvious, because that will define what you can and cannot do. Get that understanding first. And what you explain to the client is, here's what you have. And it's like when you do your comparative market analysis, right? You have those characteristics. Well, I'm giving you a little bit more drill down in the land use and permitting side of it, because we're talking about future values, and you can't get there unless you go through this system, right? So they need to understand what they can do today. And the second part of it would be, just get a rule of thumb kind of idea. Okay, if either they or a buyer wants to take that site to a higher use, get a feel for what are the fees to do that. Your consulting fees, the level of construction design work, just a round number, not an exact one, and the time, because then you can factor that in. The seller can say, well, I need to sell this spring. We have other things we're going to sell now. So give me my price point, do your CMA. And yes, I've done these other things that we can inform the buyer, but let's get that price point. Or they say, well, thank you for that information. I think I'd rather target the sale for next year. What do we do to get into a better position next year? Well, by this analysis, you can say, okay, I can do X, Y, Z. Maybe there's some basic things on the site that the brokers typically tell you, as far as cleaning it up, street presence, et cetera. And maybe there's some other regulatory things in behind it that'll help you. So you get into this discussion of when's the exit point. Okay. But if someone is banking on this to have a significant density increase on the residential market, I think you're really premature. You're basically acknowledging you're not going to experience that until 2026. I would not engage a broker to make a sale on my property based on what I think is going to happen in 2026. Okay.
I know this about you. Yeah.
And that's, at full value, now, and our conversation should be, okay, that's great then if you hang around, Bill, but Sally and John are going to buy this from you. And okay, so now I need to adjust my expectations. I need to, with your expertise on your CMA, say, okay, here's where your price points are today,
Yeah. So it's helping people adjust their expectations unless they are willing to either wait or do the work to get it to the point where it's that thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even if you go to that thing, there's going to be a cost. There's going to be an investment.
Yeah. So we've talked about looking forward. We've talked about looking back. What are some things that you're excited about, or some things that you're kind of like flinching about that are coming up?
Last time we talked, I was excited about townhouses coming into the market, because in lower port of the central part of Puget Sound and many other areas around the country, their markets have matured into townhouses being a very good product. And I think we hit some times here in Bellingham where it was a good product, but what I'm seeing now, it's not being as accepted in the marketplace. And I'm hearing two things. I just had a conversation yesterday with a particular builder who's done a lot of townhouses, and he said, our thought was we would build these for the end buyer. You know, we're gonna sell these individually. Well, those price points are rising, so I have to default back to renting these, and they're actually being built for a good rental commodity. Okay, and in different areas, it depends on what you have to spend for your utilities. In some areas, for example, you can spend upwards about 28,000 to have your water and sewer connections for one townhouse. But if you group them together, say 6 or 8 of them in one building, instead of 28,000 per unit, it may drop to 14 or 15 per unit. Okay, cut in half. But you can never convert it later to individual townhouses.
Right.
You've made it as one rental projects with those full 6 to 8 units together, right? As opposed to 6 to 8 individual townhouses you can sell as its own fee simple. So I'm seeing folks sliding over here to the income property side. Vacancies are high. You can build them pretty well. You're building under IRC instead of UBC, so or IBC, so there's lesser cost to it in some cases. Quicker to get out completed and out of the ground, but the rental rates are there. They're creeping up, so they're like, well, I'll just go over here and make it an income property. You know, if you go the other route, be prepared. You need to know, will it hit the that branch or that segment of the population that can indeed afford it, and you're squeezing the units down too. You're not out greater than 2,000 square feet. You're coming down smaller.
So it's back to that ebb and flow around rental versus sale, and it seems like that rental level is rising.
Yes.
Do you see there being? I mean, obviously, I've been trying to avoid the conversation around interest rates because it's just so beat to death. But do you think that, say, rates come down, that just starts to deflate immediately? Do you think that those people that have been holding on to those or went the route of condominiumizing them, do you think they're kind of left with their pants down a little bit in that way? I mean, do they sell it all together as one project, or what do they do? How does that become available?
I think they've made their major investment decision
Yeah.
by having them as an income property, and that's what you've got. Because if you cannot put, because of the policy in most of the agencies, cities, is that each unit has its own water, its own sewer, because then you know who's being served and who's paying. And so since the developers made a decision, put these, say, 8 units on one water and one sewer stub, you can't break the building up later. And condominiumize, that's a 4-letter word from what I've heard of most real estate agents and real estate attorneys that I've talked to, because the cost is so expensive to do all your prospectus, your background documents, and just the construction itself. So you go to these smaller income properties. But if a well-heeled entity has strong net worth and they want to go ahead and absorb the cost of having individual units, thinking that it's simply going to appreciate and I will sell it eventually. Yeah, you have a commodity bucket then, right? You got 8 different homes in our example that you can sell individually.
Yeah.
Last
question here. What is the most overbuilt unit style? Because I know, and I kind of have an answer in my head, but I would love to hear your opinion on, these people that are projecting way far in the future and they're making this bet. They're putting it on red 36 or whatever it is and spinning the wheel. But educated guess, what have you seen over the last 5 years that has this is the next new thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, the market is completely diluted with this one product? I mean, what have you seen?
I guess I'll attack it from 2 areas. I hear a lot of people that are in the commercial market that are really concerned about the whole brick and mortar setup. Certainly on the much larger buildings, those risks are there. Bellis Fair has gone through its thing. Yeah. You're seeing this nationally, that those sort of larger projects are being repurposed. They're tearing them down wholesale. 5, 6, 7-story residential. We may see that in Bellingham. We may see that. And at the same time, I know people that they've pulled back from wanting to build standalone commercial properties. We can drive around town. You got various vacancies and the like. It's not dire like some parts of the nation, but it's, they are beginning to pull back a little bit. As far as overbuilding, I don't know if I could really say that there is overbuilding, because I mean, a lot of 2-bedroom apartments have come out, a lot of 1-bedrooms, there's some studios. But if you're still running 1.5%, 2%, 2.5% vacancy, it's kind of like they're being absorbed. I'm not close enough to say everybody hates the 2-bedroom and they really need 3-bedroom. I don't know that. We'd have to, pose that question to someone else. But at least within the Bellingham and in the urban markets, I don't get a feel of something's being totally overbuilt.
Yeah.
Someone else may have a different opinion.
I don't think anything's
Yeah.
being overbuilt. I just kind of because obviously we're at such a deficit with new units coming on the market.
Yeah.
But
The other thing that I do hear that the demand continues to be is smaller businesses that are either starting out or they're just now breaking away, and they're looking for that 1,500, 2,500 square foot flex space, industrial office space. That's counterintuitive to the brick and mortar, but these are folks that they're manufacturing something that just started to put pieces together, or it's a construction company that wants to park their vehicles, or it's or even it's a service company that take your choice, insurance company or temporary workers or doctors or whatever, but not so much the medical area. But that flex space is in still pretty good demand.
pretty high demand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, you are a wealth of knowledge, and
Thank
we all appreciate you and what you do to bridge those gaps, because there's gaps between industries. And so I have so much respect for you, and I appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge. And
Glad to do
we'll
it.
see you again in 2 years here.
Probably.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes if I still have all this.
Can we sign you up on a long-term deal on a contract?
Well, you got to negotiate that with my grandkids.
Okay. That sounds good. Awesome.
All right.